ready to call the May 26th,
24th.
May 24th, 2021 Grafton Planning Board meeting to order. We're doing this by Zoom according to the governor's order. You want to
Mr.
read
Chairman, would you
that?
like me to go through the spiel?
Do the whole thing?
So pursuant to the Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, GL 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15th, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, the various boards and committees representing the town of Grafton will conduct their public meetings and hearings via remote participation. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted.
Okay.
All participants entering the meeting via a personal computer. Computer participants are required to rename themselves with their official first and last name. Computer participants are encouraged to click on the participants feature in Zoom to view all participants and to use the Q&A function to post questions on the bottom of the screen. Computer participants may pin to a particular video screen. We suggest either the staff member or chairperson. The chairman at the beginning of the meeting will identify him or herself and conduct a roll call of the board. Chairman will then call the meeting chairman has called the meeting to order. All participants, excluding board members, will be muted throughout the meeting and must use the Q&A function. All participants are required to include their name and address when using the chat feature to post questions through the chairperson. All documents displayed throughout the meeting will be controlled by the present staff member or chair. If and when the chairman allows for public comments and questions, it will be conducted in the following sequence. The chair will read public comments and questions received in advance of the meeting, followed by real-time board and/or applicant responses. The chair will read real-time comments and questions typed by computer participants in the Q&A feature, followed by real-time board and/or applicant responses. And then the chairman will ask if any other participants accessing the meeting have comments or questions. Please be advised that the current meeting is being recorded. So anything that you display via video or audio or chat may be captured by public record.
Okay. Now, before we get to item one, custom.
You have to call the roll.
Oh, all right. Call the roll. I'm Bob Hassinger. Dave?
Present.
Justin?
Present.
Linda?
Present.
Prabhu?
Present.
I'm present. Vikram?
Present.
Good. Chris, the others that we have present.
Present, and then Natalia Allward, staff.
Present.
All right.
All right. Well, I guess that's good enough. We have one thing. Ordinarily at this meeting, the first meeting after the election, we have reorganization, but it didn't make it onto the agenda. And there's been suggestion that we just do reorganization next time, rather than trying to do something that's not on the agenda.
Yeah, I apologize. I wasn't aware that we can add it to the June 14th meeting agenda.
Is that agreeable? Right? Is that not agreeable to anyone? Doesn't seem to be not agreeable. All right, public input.
That's what I assumed would happen.
Yes. Public input. This is where we give people who want to say something to us that's not involved in our agenda items tonight. They get a chance to do so. Is there anybody who wants to have anything to say? Apparently not. Moving on. 2A, approval not required A&R 2021-44 lots, 183 Upton Street, Roger Lee Robinson.
So I'll just share screen for a second. So this A&R was received by our office. This is actually waterfront along this area. As you'll note, the major changes here is lot 1, and then is one existing lot along this stone wall, whereas lot 2, 3, and 4 currently are one single lot being split by this plan. There is some portion of lot 1 which is existing being conveyed over to this lot 2, so the lot lines are changing a little bit in that way, giving additional frontage and kind of widening this access here. So
Yeah. Took me a little while to track down exactly what this was. It's between 140 and Silver Lake. It's on the east side, I suppose.
Mhm.
It's adjacent to, or more or less adjacent to the land that the town just bought. That's off to the left from that plan, I think, if you remember. Have they withdrawn it from, not that it matters to what we're doing, but have they withdrawn it from 40 whatever, from the chapter?
Chapter 60.
Or, yeah, one of the things is, will the town be seeing that one, or did that base already get covered? I don't remember.
I don't believe a request to have it taken out of chapter has been received yet. The right of first refusal, but I will follow up to see if that will be happening.
Gee, I wonder if making this A&R plan might have an implication as to triggering that. But in any case, that's not what we're doing tonight. We need to decide whether this is A&R eligible and whether it should be approved. Does anybody have any questions about it or concerns? If not,
I will offer a motion that the board find that approval is not required for this plan and authorize a planner to sign on behalf of the board.
Second.
moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. Dave,
Aye.
Justin,
Aye.
Linda,
Aye.
Prabhu,
Aye.
and I say aye. Let's see. I was just thinking whether you might want to mention what Vikram told us about his plans. It just occurred to me, so that people know.
Is Vikram still on the call, or?
I lost him. In any case, there is an appointment coming up for the associate position. Supposedly, appointment hopefully can be done in time for the first July meeting, because apparently the associate's term runs until the end of June. So that's out there, and it wasn't announced along with other appointments. So be aware of that. All right. Bond reduction request, Millstone Drive.
Yeah, so I'd respectfully request, actually I do see Stephen Acasa is on the line. I was looking to get a formal request presented to the board if detailing if it was a reduction of the full amount or not. I did send up an a follow-up email today. We haven't received that formal request, but I do see that Steve Benincasa is the project proponent is on the call. So with your discretion, maybe I could defer to him.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Why are you guys suppressing this?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So we've been working towards completion of the roadway here for some time now, and we have got everything done on the road itself, and the as-built have been completed and submitted. The only thing that is not completed is letters from the town departments, and we have requested that at least a week ago. I'm not sure how long ago, but at least a week ago. So we're waiting for the town departments to issue their letters. But we have done the checklist with Graves Engineering, and we have all the as-built in. So we are 100% done with the road and have been done for some time now.
How
So
long?
I'm sorry.
How long?
We paved the road last summer, actually. So it's already been through a whole nother winter.
Yeah. So sorry.
Go
There
ahead.
were some additional items that we've been cleaning up throughout the fall as well. Kind of the street lights. So I do know that we're very close, if not kind of fully done with all the punch list items that I could find. I have not received back from Graves that kind of the full blessing, but I can definitely coordinate with them to make sure that just the only reason I'm a little bit hesitant, obviously this project predates me, so I just want to make sure that we're all squared away.
Yeah.
So
Normally, we would expect to receive the letter from Graves detailing any remaining items, or in the best of all worlds, documenting that everything has been completed satisfactorily. I think once it sounds like we ought to be there once we actually receive that formal notice from Graves. So yeah, but normally we don't act on a bond reduction request without that paperwork.
Yeah. Also, I think we get an analysis of the bond numbers, how much, because we have to retain a significant amount. And we usually get a printout about that too. So I don't think we can grant a bond reduction tonight, can we?
I would say it's certainly not. That's not the way we would normally do it.
Right.
I think we pending the documentation. It sounds like it's likely to be, once we receive that documentation, it's likely to be routine and straightforward to actually to act on that request.
yeah, respectfully, I would suggest that in between, since the bond reduction request is for the full amount, that's what I'm understanding tonight, is that we can, the applicant should probably work towards the determination of completeness certification. I'll circle back with Graves, which is somewhat a part of that as well, and we can do those processes in tandem to close out this project if everything's satisfactory. So
Has the road been accepted?
it has not.
So what portion, may I speak?
Yes.
What portion of the bond do you need to retain until the road is accepted? Because I know that you would probably want to keep some portion of the bond, but.
It's in the rules. Chris, do you remember the exact?
Unfortunately, not off the top of my head, but I can.
Okay, work with them then, I guess.
Yep.
Anything more on this?
So would, if you get a letter from Graves Engineering
So the process that I would recommend is to submit a formal letter from you requesting a full bond reduction. And you could submit that both to Graves and to the planning department. Graves will then come back with either, here's a list of items that still need to be completed, or they will give their sign off. In addition to that, I would recommend that you start the determination of completeness process, which is outlined on the town website. I'm happy to point you to those resources if needed.
No, we've started that process, some time ago, and it's been almost a year since we completed the roadway. So we're not, it's not like we did yesterday. We're asking the bond to release today. It's been, and it's a substantial amount of money that's being held. And we'd like to have, I recognize that you may not want to release the entire road until it's accepted. And I'm asking for as much as possible. So don't deny me if I ask for a full bond reduction and you tell me that you can't when there's a substantial amount that's being held. That's what I ask.
Now, there's a set of steps that you need to go through, and I think you'll get there a lot quicker talking to Chris offline, since I don't know how many others remember all the details, but I think a clock starts when you make a request. There's more
So
than
again, a formal request has not yet been received. I've gotten emails requesting for some assistance in getting through the process, and I've just,
And what form would you like the formal request? Can I send an email?
please put a letter on letterhead and submit that in and
Mail in, okay.
okay. I think we'll continue this to the next meeting, or whenever we're ready to take the next step on that.
Yeah, I'll have the letter in. If I could be placed on the agenda for next meeting, I would appreciate that.
Talk to Chris about what you
Yes.
can do. Okay,
Work that through the office, and assuming that the paperwork all flows through the process as it normally would, and all the i's have been dotted, all the t's have been crossed. Our very next meeting after all that happens, we should be able to wrap this up easily.
Thank you.
okay. I see Vikram got his connection back. While you were away, I mentioned that there's a appointment of associate coming up the end of June, and I thought you might want to be the one to tell people here what your plan is.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Yeah, I think I've been thinking about this, and I know I've been on this board for about 2 years, and from my side, I think the commitment involved is pretty high, and I don't think I am able to do that. So I would like to, step aside and give somebody else an opportunity to play this role. I'm happy to be here till you find a replacement. So I don't want to put June 30th as a hard date, because I know it takes time to appoint someone. So I'm happy to, fill this role till.
I think the term of the appointment just runs until the end of June.
Okay.
So this is by way of letting people know that there's an opportunity there to apply for appointment to the position. I believe it needs to, it should come into both the selectmen and the planning department, since it's a joint appointment. And we're going to have room for CMRPC delegate appointments. So people who are interested in being delegates to CMRPC, let us know. All right, moving on. Covenant approval SP 2020-04/SPA 274 Providence Street.
Yep. So for this one, we did have a request from the project proponent. We had this before Ginny, town council for review. I've not heard back from her as of this meeting. I know that there's been a lot of other projects as well on her plate lately. I do note that in talking with the project proponent, they were looking at, part of this covenant was looking at referencing the decision rather than an actual surety. This is a multifamily development special permit under the VMU. So I think that would be consistent. As you know, I agree with them that that may be consistent along with, as this isn't a definitive subdivision or where that type of surety is usually required. But I was hoping to hear back from Ginny to that point, just to be sure on that end. But that was a request from the project proponent.
You know, I really want to hear from Ginny because I don't remember this this particular process before under any conditions. And I'd really like to hear from her before I decide. How do other people feel?
You know, this is one of 4 alternatives for guaranteeing performance that's generally laid out in the subdivision control law, and may be applicable to BMU as well. I don't think I can remember having seen this particular form before. Normally it's a bond of some kind that we get. But this is one of 4 legally recognized alternatives. And as Bob, I would want to hear from town council as to whether this is satisfactory from town council's perspective. If town council gives a stamp of approval on this, then I would not hesitate to accept it. But without town council's reading on this, without town council's opinion on this, I don't think we want to move forward.
I would agree.
Yeah. The 4 forms of surety that you mentioned are in the subdivision control law. And I'm not sure if I'm not mistaken, and I'm not sure that the subdivision control law applies here.
No, it wouldn't.
And so Ginny needs to untangle that.
Yep. Yeah. Is this appropriate and valid under the village mixed use zoning bylaw?
Yeah. I think that's the best we can do tonight. Anybody on that? Nobody on that.
So sorry, we have Jim Sullivan has his hand raised.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I thought I changed it to be my name.
Sorry.
So this is Elizabeth Minini from Gary Aaron Halnan. And just to your points, that's my concern is whether I filled out the document assuming that I could just change the pieces that referred to subdivision to refer to the project. And as I got to the end, there's a section that refers to a subdivision control law, and it seemed odd to me that there's no way for me to change that to refer to something else. So I'm not sure that bonding or this document really qualify for this kind of project. But certainly I am not a lawyer, and I was looking forward to hearing from town council as to whether or not this applied or not. But I wanted to get it completed because it was something that was identified as outstanding. But if it's not, then obviously we're happy to move on.
If there's no objection, we'll give council another chance. Hopefully get some input for our next meeting.
Is there any reason that you can think of that we couldn't move forward with what we're doing? Couldn't they move forward with construction while this is being sorted out, I guess is my question.
Yes, I believe so. I will follow up with town council and try to have something more definitive tomorrow. And
Yeah.
I'll reach out to you.
I understand how busy everybody is, so I certainly don't want to rush the process unless it's actually holding us up. So if you get back to me and let me know that it's okay for them to move forward, that there's still potential bonding that may need to take place in the future, that's, then we'll address that at that time. Thank you.
Okay. So if there's no objection, we'll proceed in that way. Let's see now. It is past 7:30, so we can go to our public hearings. 6A, request for modification of special permit SP 1996-6.4/SPA and site plan approval, 109 Creeper Hill Road. Feedback Earth Inc., Troiano Trucking.
So
I have a public notice, Mr. Chair.
Oh, yes, that would be good.
Pursuant to sections 1.5.7 and 1.3.3 of the Town of Grafton zoning bylaws, the planning board will hold a public hearing on Monday, May 24th, 2021, commencing at 7:30 p.m. to consider an application to modify and approve special permit decision and site plan approval, SP 1996-6/SPA, for a 70-foot by 83-foot building addition and to expand an existing concrete pad to 40 feet by 75 feet on property located at 109 Creeper Hill Road, shown as Grafton Assessors Map 17, Lot 2. Said property is located in an office light industrial OLI zoning district. The applicant is Feedback Earth Incorporated and the owner is Troiano Realty LLC. Copies for the publication and plan are available for public inspection on the Town of Grafton website at www.grafton-ma.gov on the Planning Department Development Projects webpage. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 2020 stay-at-home advisory, this meeting will be conducted via remote participation. Please see www.grafton-ma.gov/planning board for more information.
Okay. Chris, yeah, here we go.
Yeah, so I do note that we have the project applicants here. So the board, I believe, may be familiar with this site. This is along Creeper Hill Road, 109. It's Troiano Trucking Operations. This facility did have a fire in the past and had a portion of the building that was damaged by that fire. These plans are looking to both clean up the site in terms of that damage that was done by the fire and also really kind of make the operations of the food waste to feed operations more efficient and frankly safer. And so they're really going to be enhancing those operations and bringing them to a new level, along with cleaning up the site. So the proposed addition to the damaged portion of the building, this is a portion down here that they'll be renovating, as well as a concrete pad for loading along this site here. I'll leave it off to the project proponents we have on the call today, I believe. Let me just see if. Yep, we have Allison Greenlee and David Janacek as well on the call. So I'll defer to you two if you want to give some more background and details of the project.
Hi, good evening. My name is Allison Greenlee, and Chris, thank you so much for that overview and introduction. You should introduce us more often. I'm joined here today by my colleague, David Janacek, who is COO, and I'm Chief Executive Officer for Feedback Earth. So for the proposal for today, this is wonderfully one of many discussions that we're having, not only with MassDev, yourselves, but also Mass Agriculture. And given our short time, I'll give you a quick overview and background of the site and what Feedback Earth is looking to do. And then I'll hand it over to David and Mo Azizi to tell you about some of the specifics entailed with the project being proposed here today. So
may I share my screen, Chris?
Yep. And as many of you may already be familiar with, at 109 Creeper Hill Road, there is an original plant that processes food waste into animal feed. And so specifically food waste is taken in from restaurants, cafeterias, grocery stores, food manufacturers. It's mixed together, dried and pelletized into animal feed that is sold at a discount to local farmers and mills. This facility was originally built in 2018 by Triano Trucking. But the original plant, as Chris described, had some unfortunate limitations that not only resulted in, let's say, ineffective operations, but resulted in the facility going bankrupt. We at Feedback Earth became involved with this operation and when we entered into an agreement to buy the facility in 2020. That sale will be executed this upcoming June. So in a couple of weeks, we will become the new owners of that site. And our ambition is to infuse a significant amount of capital on the order of about $6 million into the space to, as how Chris described, to overhaul operations, overhaul the site, put in new equipment and new technologies so that not only can we operate at a much higher level of throughput, but we can reduce the congestion and the logistics of the area, improve the safety, and most importantly, of course, produce a good, safe, and regular product. The scope of the work that's being presented today is to expand the facility, or not, maybe that's not the right choice of word, but to overhaul a portion of the area that has historically been burned down, to bring it back into commission and to use that space to improve the operations. And the ambition here is, of course, not only to have this site become fully fledged operational and adopt Tier 1 practices, but to, of course, be a good corporate citizen to the city of North Grafton and, of course, to the state of Massachusetts. And so I'm going to pass you off to David, who's going to take you through some of the specifics of what's being proposed here today. And I appreciate your time and consideration with this proposal.
Excellent, thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, everybody else, thank you for taking the time today. What I'm going to hopefully do in 3 minutes or 4 minutes or so is show you what's going on and then leave the rest of the time of our little time for Q&A. Allison gave us some of the context. The building restoration, which is the subject of today's planning board meeting, was burnt down in 1999, and we seek to restore and expand it. The main takeaway for what we want to do is that we want this area to serve as a dedicated food waste intake area. And you will see in the slides that I'll show why that's important. Focus for today as we go through this, please point out concerns about the intent, the use, the operations of the proposed building, and identify any potential issues that would impede planning board approval next month. So what's going on? These are existing warehouses where the operation is going on. The big issue that we want to solve is logistical interference. You have these blue lines, which are waste dump trucks, food waste dump trucks that unload food waste onto the floor. You kind of see a picture here of what that looks like before it gets loaded into the packager, before it gets mixed. Dry and wet stuff get mixed together before they get shredded up and dried and formed into feed. Now, The feed is the yellow line. It has to, the way we store it, the way we load it into trailers is we use these little bobcats, these skid loaders, and they have to take it off of the floor, get out the building, enter the building again. They crisscross over here, right, in order to load the trailer in this pit. Here's the picture of our loader and a pit. In fact, I will zoom into this picture right now. And you see kind of what's going on here. Food waste gets dumped onto the floor, gets pushed around by Bobcat, and it gets loaded into the process somewhat not automatically. And our solution to this is to renovate the adjacent building. This is the subject of this planning board meeting. So what we want to be able to do is have this divide between the waste side on the left and the feed side on the right. And that's what we're trying to do with this burned down building. What does it look like, right? So the existing condition plan kind of highlights what's going on here. This is that burned down building, right? Which Chris already kind of showed on the earlier site plan. And what we want to do, right, with that building, which here's a photograph, right? It's located to the south of the existing warehouses, right? What we want to do is quite honestly just tear it down and build it up, right? So currently you see kind of the remnants of skeleton that's left behind. And what we are proposing, right, and this is the site plan that we have submitted to this meeting, is in addition to these warehouses 1 and 2, is to add this third one, right? And that's the subject of, again, this call. The way we will use it, and here are the key points, is that we do not want to change the operational purpose of the facility in any way. We simply want to be able to do what it's permitted to already do. A key second point is there are no changes to existing traffic pattern around the property. Really what we're looking to do is make this area a dedicated waste intake, and I'll show you some 3D illustrations of how that will actually work. Now you'll notice some scary red lines here. We did some wetland surveying earlier this year in April, actually, that identified a perennial stream to the south of the property that had not been identified in prior wetland surveying. Now, our proposed building does overlap with the 200-foot riverfront area, and that is subject of the Conservation Committee meeting, which will happen in a couple weeks from now. Some cool 3D pictures for everybody. This is kind of what we want to do. So this is a top view. 70 by 80 is the proposed footprint, or 83. And specifically what we want to be able to do is trucks that come in around, we want them to be able to back in, and whether they're trailer trucks or dump trucks, be able to immediately make material move rather than keep it stored on the floor. Here's an alternate view. Trucks would come around the side as per the already existing traffic pattern. They would back in, and there's 4 bays for them to be able to back in. And what you will notice is that immediately, as soon as food is dumped or food waste is dumped, it is immediately moving. It is not staying on the floor. It is immediately going into the process, introduced directly into the process. Here's an alternate view from this is from the west direction, right? Again, direct dumps into these hoppers, which have live floors, so live belts that move the material here towards our big machines here, which these are depackaging machines. They separate organic waste from packaging. You'll notice this interesting thing here. This little forklift is supposed to be able to go in and out of these. Some of the food waste that we receive comes in trailers, and it takes them in directly from the trailer and loads them into the depackaging machine. That is how we want to use the space. And I now invite the audiences here to come up with any questions, issues, concerns about the use and the operation of the area.
I'm curious what energy source you use for the drying. Not that it makes a big difference, but I'm
yeah, so already permitted, and we're not changing it. It's an industrial dryer rated to 30 million BTUs, natural gas powered.
Natural gas. Okay, and the other thing is, are you taking away any of the parking spaces from the previous permit?
No, sir.
Okay. Chris, are we changing the parking requirements because of expansion or of the, just want to be sure that these properties along here have
So
not been the easiest.
on the provided site plans, they did include the parking calculation showing that they are within the required parking, given the spaces as outlined on the site plan.
Okay. Who else has questions? I think there were some questions on some open issues in the review.
Sorry?
In Graves.
Yeah, so we have not yet received Graves. They're reviewing both for planning and for conservation.
Correct.
But we have not yet received their review letter for this.
We really have to have that, I think.
So, Mr. Chairman, I will say I agree with you. The area historically has been, somewhat of a yard where a lot of different materials were collected by the previous owners. And, Chris from this audience and Jim McQuaid over in Mass DEP and will attest to like enormous efforts that the existing team and our team have put in order to clean that site up. This place what we want to do is really do food waste only. No gypsum board, no construction demolition waste, no ABC material, none of that stuff dedicated for food waste.
Yeah, we don't need to go on and on about some of the history of this location. But for those of us who have been around a long time and involved in one way or another with land use regulation, there's a lot of history here, and I couldn't even recite it all, but that's largely irrelevant at this point.
Fair enough.
I think the thing that basically what I see here, if I understand this correctly, is that you are essentially replacing the building that burned with a new building. The new building appears to be somewhat larger in footprint than the old one. But aside from that expansion of space, just making what was an existing building into a building that is now larger, it's, the one edge of it basically extends out on this diagram, extends to the right to be parallel with the other building. That's really the only substantive change from what was there before.
Correct.
Yeah, and arguably the added square footage in theory could affect the parking calculations. In practice, it probably, it would seem like as long as we've got that base covered with parking calculations. This particular space, although it's a larger space, the use of the space is not the type that would generate a significantly higher parking requirement.
Yeah.
So from what I can see, awaiting the Graves review and just making sure that the parking calculations are properly covered. There are no other site changes being proposed here. So it looks fairly straightforward, just subject to dotting the i's and crossing the t's.
There was I think a ZBA comment.
Yes.
Could we point out where they were talking about?
It's that blue area on the top left of the screen, Bob.
Blue.
It's that concrete pad.
That says, I can't read it, but I didn't think that any of the numbers matched what they said. But you're aware of what the ZBA had to say? David?
So sorry, if you're addressing me, no, I don't. But if you're addressing David Robbins, I don't know who you're addressing.
No, I'm asking. I'm sure Dave has seen it. I'm looking at you. Have you seen what the ZBA said?
No, sir.
I think they said that that's too close and that you'll have to come to them for
I can read what they
a
said.
waiver or something like that, roughly.
I'll read verbatim for the record. The ZBA's comment reads, "The concrete pad will need to meet its front setback Currently on the proposed plans, the corner is only 23 feet off the front setback, and in the OLI district, the setback needs to be 40 feet. This will need to come before the ZBA for a variance / special permit.
Understood. Copy that.
Yeah, this special permit apparently goes back to 1996. So it's only 25 years we've been working on this puppy. Okay, anybody else for tonight? Anything else?
One question, Bob, can I?
Sure.
The building, that's a covered building, right? The new one that's going to come up. I know it's a 3D mapping. You're showing
This one, yes.
Right. So it's all covered. There is no scope for any.
Yeah, yeah, similar style and feel, same height. Ridge is along this. They all will all share a common ridge, same height, steel structure. Yes.
Yes. Thank you.
I guess back in the day, we looked at the traffic, assuming that, you know, whatever the 300 and some odd tons, whatever it is. But I take it that you haven't been doing anything like that. So when this is completed and successful and fully operational, traffic will come up from what people are currently accustomed to by some degree. How many truckloads a day, how many trucks do you suppose a day? We'll see.
We expect between 30 and 40 trucks a day, and it's limited to weekdays.
Yeah. Hopefully that's consistent with whatever we last saw and we're okay with.
Yeah.
I'm a little sensitive to this. One of the early things in my time on the board was people on the other side of Creeper Hill, a little ways down, being not at all happy with the situation. It's been a while.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's one of the consistent issues that we hear on Creeper Hill Road, because at both ends of Creeper Hill Road, the Worcester end and the Grafton end, it's residential, and then in the middle, in between, it's commercial. So the residential people on both sides are always concerned with the commercial traffic going past their homes. It's unavoidable just because of the nature of what's there, commercial sandwiched in between residential. But it is something, as Bob says, it is something that we are sensitive to, because it's come up time and again over the last 30 or so years.
Actually, there is something that can be done about it, and Worcester did. Worcester
That's right.
banned commercial traffic on their side. So all of the traffic
Oh, correct.
coming and going is on the Grafton side, and that road is not exactly a super highway. Okay, well, there's we need the Graves review, and what else we talked about?
Commission and Conservation Commission. I'll point out perhaps that the Conservation Commission meeting is on the 15th of June, whereas this planning board meets again on the 14th of June. And so we're making sure that we're as fully transparent with all the inputs that we can prior to that meeting. And our ambition is to obtain, to get that input on the 15th, so that as you deliberate in June, the decision can come still in the month of June, is kind of our ambition. And we're working with, Chris has been incredibly helpful to kind of make sure that we're not skipping any steps.
Yeah. Yeah, if you cover all those bases, then we can't do it on the 15th, but we can do it at the second meeting in the month. We can make a decision if all goes well on the 15th. Then we have often not closed the hearing until the following meeting, but have if it's simple enough, then a draft decision ready for us for that meeting on whatever it is, 29th or whenever it is.
Yeah, I would
Yes, sir.
expect that we would have the Graves report in hand before the 14th, and the Graves report would be the one that the conservation would be relying on. So if the Graves report looks good on the 14th, conservation is likely to act favorably or be ready to act favorably. So in our meeting after the 14th to 28th, it's very likely that unless something comes up with conservation to delay it, we should be able to complete our work before the end of June.
Beautiful.
Okay,
And I'll say that for me, the idea of putting raw waste in the riverfront buffer zone is a slight concern, but I'll say that if conservation is happy with it, I'm willing to defer to them on that. They're more aware of what exactly that entails, and
Mhm.
that is where that discussion should happen. So I
well,
look forward to hearing what they say.
discussion has probably been had
Yeah.
many years ago, actually, because it's essentially the same operation. Maybe
Correct. And
a little less contaminants in the food, but now, but I think,
Yep.
but in any case, we have to see what they say. I don't
Exactly.
know who the authority on that
This-
subject
This
is.
sounds like it might be an improvement in the waste handling within the buffer
I
zone
agree.
from Concom's perspective.
Okay, so are we okay on this?
I'm all set. Thank you, sir.
Good.
It sounds like it would be in order for the board to grant the applicant's written request to continue this hearing to June 14th,
Assuming that's what the.
assuming the applicant wishes to do that.
Yes, please.
Second,
There was a first? I didn't hear it first.
I-
Was there a first?
I didn't quite state it as a motion, but you could interpret it that way.
I'm
Yes.
sorry, I thought it was.
And I think that Linda
Jumped the gun.
seconded it. Any discussion on the motion?
Did we
Everybody
open,
knows what we're voting on?
sorry, Mr. Chairman, did we open for public discussion as well?
Oh, well, if there's anybody indicating a wish to speak, yes.
That would be a good idea. This is a public hearing after all. So before we act on any motion to continue, I think it'd be entirely appropriate for us to receive any public input.
Yeah, I don't know some of the people. If anybody wants to, you gotta let us know with a raised hand or with a chat. I don't know, maybe even a Q&A, but you gotta let us know. I don't see anybody letting us know.
And of course, there will be
Another chance.
another chance for public input on June 14th.
Mhm. Okay, it was moved and seconded. Discussion. Dave,
Aye.
Justin,
Aye.
Linda,
Aye.
Prabhu,
Aye.
and I vote aye. Motion carries. Get your written request into the office, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks, and good luck.
Thank you, everybody. I assume that means I can disconnect if I want, right?
Yes,
Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
good night.
Okay, that brings me to 6B, 8 Pine Street. PA 2021-01, continuation of a hearing on 8 Pine Street. Let's see where we stand.
You want me to just jump right into it, Chris?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Okay. If
For the
Chris-
record, I'm Jean Christie, Senior Engineer with Ty and Bond. I have a few things to update you folks with, just kind of status stuff before we get into the meat and potatoes of tonight's presentation, which is going to be about the traffic study that we performed. We did receive the traffic peer review comments. So we're going to talk about those in a little bit. I just have a couple quick things. So we are still waiting for Graves' follow-up letter. We did submit our response to the civil comments 2 weeks ago. I have been in touch with Mr. Walsh, and he has indicated that his review will be complete this week. So we should see something in the middle of this week. Looking forward to that. I know we want to keep that process moving in hopes of being able to potentially close the hearing in June. Late last week, I sent Chris a photometric drawing of the project. he did indicate that we were missing some information on it. The parking garage on the retail building didn't have lighting associated with it, and that's because we hadn't yet developed that design to include the lighting fixtures yet. So what you have, at least, on your side of the table is, I guess, a first step. The intent is to provide the dark sky compliant fixtures at that parking deck, at the retail parking area, both in the underside parking lot, the surface lot, and then above on the parking deck to avoid, light spilling off the property. I have a draft email that I have not yet pulled the trigger on to the fire department to kind of close the loop with their comments. I think we're at the point where Mr. Killeen is happy with what we've done so far. So I think I just wanted to circle back, close that loop up with him, and get that, to you folks. So that's my quick update. So I think moving next, we'd like to present our traffic study, go through some of the peer review comments, and solicit some information from you guys and questions from you all folks. So I'm joined tonight by Chris Granatini from Ty and Bond, who I'll just turn it over to him.
Thanks, Jean. So Chris Granatini with Ty and Bond. I've got a very brief presentation that I'll just walk through on the traffic study, and then I'll give you just a kind of status update on where we are at with our response to the peer review comments, which we received on May 19th, which were dated May 18th. We're working through just resolving all of those comments with the intent to submit a formal response letter back to the town and MDM with the expectation that we respond to their comments, address any kind of outstanding remaining items if there are any at that point, with the expectation that we would be in a position to kind of close this out in June. So I'll just quickly go through a very brief presentation. And everybody seeing my screen now? Good. So Ty and Bond performed a traffic impact assessment for the site. What you see here is the traffic study area. We've studied, starting from south to north, the intersection of Pine Street at Westboro Road, the southern site driveway, the northern site driveway, which is aligned with Centennial Drive, the intersection of Green Street and Centec Boulevard, and then at the northern end, the intersection with Route 20 and Centec Boulevard. So that's the general study area. We went through a process of aggregating various traffic data sets, prior approved traffic studies, and other sources of data that we used to develop both existing and future traffic volumes. We were counting traffic within the pandemic influences, and so we used various methods and data sets in order to kind of recalibrate the traffic. And based on the peer review comments, MDM found our methodology acceptable. So, and that's a method that we've had to utilize over the course of the last year or so in order to kind of keep traffic engineering work moving, is taking data that predates the pandemic and then calibrating existing data that we collect with pre-pandemic data to make sure that we're trying to be as reflective as possible of what normal traffic will be like once we get past the current state of affairs. So then we look at the existing site. What this table presents is kind of an overall summary of the site traffic that will be generated by the proposed development. And so there's two main pieces of the development. There are the residential units, so there's 317 apartments. And then there's the 23,300 square feet of retail space. And then what we do is we utilize some trip generation credits. So for instance, the fact that we're located across the street from an MBTA station allows us to reduce traffic based on industry kind of guidance. So we subtract some of those generated trips with the context of people will be using that alternative travel mode. It's a mixed use development, so there's retail and residential in the same development. That's called internal capture, which means that trips that would generally be generated by the residential units and would go outside the development don't actually get generated. So we have the ability to reduce some of the anticipated traffic from the development based on those two trip generation credits. So what that results in is a total of 118 future, site generated morning peak hour trips, 232 afternoon peak hour trips, 301 Saturday midday trips, and then the total site trips is shown there as 2345. So that's the total new trips out of the site on a weekday in both in and out. And then from there, we looked at kind of destinations in the area, current trip patterns, and we distributed the new trips across the roadway network, generally north or south away from the site towards Route 20 or towards Route 30. And all that data was presented in our traffic study. So just jumping to some of the kind of study conclusions. As I mentioned, this is a mixed use development. It's also transit-oriented residential and retail development because of its proximity to the MBTA station. We've prepared the study in accordance with Town of Grafton and MassDOT standards, following industry guidelines, utilizing industry manuals and documents. The site has 2 unsignalized driveways on Pine Street, both with stop control on the driveways only. And then we have 1 additional gated emergency access driveway on Green Street. And I expect that you've seen all of this on the site plans that you've been presented previously. Looking at traffic capacity, the analyses that we conducted, we found that the capacity is similar between the build and no build conditions. Or it operates at an acceptable level of service D or better. The site driveways operate at level of service C or better for entering and exiting movements. And all the design queues accommodated within available storage. And those are the cars that would stack up at an intersection waiting to make their turns. With respect to the expectation that residents living in this development will be traveling to the nearby MBTA station, we are proposing some pedestrian infrastructure improvements to help with pedestrian safety. We are proposing at the 2 crossings at the 2 site driveways to put in rectangular rapid flashing beacons. Those are pedestrian actuated, where the pedestrian walks up, pushes the button, it actuates the strobe lights along with the signage to help motorists identify the fact that pedestrians are actively crossing at that location. And that's in recognition of the pedestrian traffic that we expect to be flowing between the development and the MBTA station. And then ultimately, we found that this development is not expected to have a significant impact to traffic operations in the study area. So now I just want to transition over and just touch on some of the key points that came out of the peer review, which we are actively working on even today. The first thing is that I believe MDM has found that the study has been prepared in general conformance with industry standards, that we've, developed existing baseline traffic conditions, and that we've basically followed a standard of care that you would expect any traffic study to follow for this development. We are actively, one of the comments that we are looking at very closely is the context of sightlines. We are preparing the plans that were requested, which involve both reviewing both intersection sight distance and stopping sight distance along Pine Street and from the site driveway. So stopping sight distance is basically the distance that a driver needs to identify the need to stop and then stop their vehicle. And that is measured, would be measured along Pine Street. So we've looked at the two site driveways, we've looked at, travel speeds and determined what the stopping sight distance is for the two site driveways. We're also looking at intersection sight distance. So that is the distance that a driver on the site driveways would need to look either left or right from the site driveway and then make a turning movement out of the site onto Pine Street. So we will, present the full analysis along with drawings and a written response to the peer reviewer, hopefully by the end of this week. So that's our plan with that comment and how we plan to address it. We also plan to work with the peer reviewer and the town to install an intersection warning sign, primarily for the southerly site driveway. And we also think that the installation of a vehicular actuated radar speed sign would also benefit both the development and drivers on Pine Street as they approach this development from the south. So that's another thing that we do plan to include. As we noted, we are including the rectangular rapid flashing beacons at the two site driveways. As Gene noted, we are working with the fire marshal to provide the drawings that they need, demonstrating that a fire truck can navigate the site. So as we work through that process, we will keep the peer reviewer in the loop with that coordination with the town. With respect to the comment on transportation demand management, we believe that, with the development located directly across from the MBTA rail station, that this is, already a very attractive site with respect to basically naturally occurring TDM. Residents of the development will want to live there because it's so, close to the MBTA station. They'll be able to walk and ride their bikes. There will be some accommodations on the site for bicycle storage in the parking garage. So, the developer will, provide some additional kind of amenities to allow residents to store their bikes in the garage. But we do view it as close enough to walk to the MBTA station. So, from a TDM perspective, we believe that the site in and of itself just has, naturally occurring reductions of travel because of its proximity to the station, and that we find that, based on the peer review comments and the work we've done to date on the peer review comments, that the conclusions that we reached in the traffic study remain unchanged and valid, and that we'll do the work and provide the data that's required to address the comments in a way that's acceptable to MDM. So with that, I'll take a breath and see if there's any questions or comments.
Does anybody else have any? I did get to wondering, I'm not quite clear about the background traffic estimate is. That is, what, with or without you, what will happen on those roads. We have had, maybe will have, a big project right there at the town line on the other side. UPS with, a major facility. I think there's some other talk of some sizable stuff, not just perhaps considerably more traffic generating than just an ordinary everyday development along Centennial Boulevard. And maybe you can review how the projections have been made, and also how the work that's moving forward at 20 and Centennial by the state is going to influence all of this. The state has a major project going on with Route 20.
Mr. Chair, this is Robert Michaud of MDM Transportation Consultants. Was that a question posed to Chris, or is that something that you want me to opine on?
Whoever is your best choice.
I'll take a quick stab, and then Chris can jump in if he needs to. So for the record, Robert Michaud, I'm the managing principal of MDM Transportation Consultants. We've served as the town's review agent, peer review consultant on a number of occasions. And interestingly, in this particular case, our firm worked directly with Mass Development and the town of Shrewsbury on the Centec North project. And we're very well versed with what's happening there along Route 20 and other projects in Shrewsbury that might come to bear. The applicant here, Ty & Bond, in their conduct of the traffic study, really took the time to look at area studies because of the pandemic factors, as Chris had mentioned, influencing current traffic conditions. It was appropriate to look at history, other recently completed studies, one of those being Centec North, but there were at least two other studies that were considered as well, all of which contained pre-pandemic traffic volumes, generally between 2018 and 2019. And in fact, those data were collected during higher than average seasonal conditions as well, and were subject to intense review by Mass DOT through the state environmental review process. So we're comfortable that the information that Ty & Bond is relying on for its analysis is appropriate, not only because it represents pre-pandemic condition, but because they've also taken the time to adjust that volume condition to reflect 2 additional years of growth above and beyond what was assumed in those prior studies. So those are representative of what we would call typical or peak hour conditions pre-pandemic. As it relates to other area projects that might come to bear, UPS as an example, that is not a formal proposal at this point, but there is talk about it moving forward. That project on its own merits would sustain a very large impact, far beyond anything that this project is proposing. And we have been asked that same question in the conduct of our study for Mass Development in the town of Shrewsbury. What if that happens? And the answer lies in the infrastructure that is being contemplated along Route 20 in particular. And as you're probably aware, the state has, in the town of Shrewsbury, have engaged in a future year analysis of long-range improvements to the Route 20 corridor that include widening to a 4-lane cross-section, substantial signal upgrades and enhancements, all of which were actually reviewed and incorporated into the Centec North study and referenced in that study. Those future improvements, while they would probably be needed to support a larger development like UPS, are not currently in the cards, so to speak. There's no state funding that's been identified for advancing those Route 20 improvements. So that's, in our view, very much a long-range plan. To the extent a project like UPS formally files and is subject to review, the likely outcome of that would be that certain improvements along Route 20 in particular would probably be expedited and advanced through private funding sources well before state monies come to bear, unless and until other state grants like MassWorks development programs or funding became available. So the assumptions that Ty and Bond has used in the conduct of their study are appropriate. They certainly don't take into account the potential for development like UPS because those projects haven't officially filed for anything. So it wouldn't be appropriate to guess as to whether or not that would happen. So hopefully that gives the board some background and understanding about the traffic volume conditions that were assumed in the study, which we think are appropriate, and the potential future projects along Route 20, which in our view are long range, long view, probably won't come to bear anytime within the next 5 to 10 years.
I hear a little bit more than most people about the Route 20 situation since I'm chairman of the Regional Planning Traffic Planning Commission, CMRPC's committee, and I represent CMRPC on the MPO, where the money for, the state money and the federal money kind of comes by and we see it. And I thought that there's been talk about, a little bit more, a little closer to doing things on 20 than it sounded there. But in any case, I'm just concerned, what are we looking at, particularly on our end, on the Route 30 end? I know that we have people even here tonight who go through there every day and find it not working very well already particularly during train events, particularly. And I think that intersection on Route 30 is better than what it was, I guess, before the state did the work and rebuilt the bridge. But it's not exactly a great intersection. I'm just kind of worried about that. But we have to go with what we have to go with, I suppose. Who else has questions or comments?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So I welcome the infrastructure improvements that I think that was newer. There are 2 points of flashing beacons and 1 warning, the speed warning. Is that the 3 things that you guys talked about?
Yeah, so we're proposing to, in addition to at the 2 site driveways, that would be where we would install the pedestrian actuated RFBs, and that would work for both sides of the street for pedestrians that are walking between the development and any locations along Pine Street. And then we talked about installing a intersection warning sign, which is just the sign that tells motorists that there's an intersection ahead. And in addition to that, the sign that measures the speed of the vehicle and then provides, some sort of visual warning, whether it's flashing the speed or, in different colors. I've seen, there's a lot of different variations of what that sign can look like. But it basically is telling motorists that they're exceeding the speed limit and that they should slow down. So those are the improvements that we view. And the intersection warning, the speed warning would be for northbound Pine Street traffic. So heading north, at the development from the south, heading north, because the other driveways have sight lines that, exceed the minimum requirements. So it's the one driveway at the south driveway and the northbound traffic approaching it that warrants some additional warning, an advanced warning to that driveway. So that's what the proposed improvements are from a pedestrian and vehicular safety perspective.
My other point was I had this request for Ms. Christie the last time around, that apart from this, it's the maintenance, it's the ongoing maintenance of snow clearance and so on and so forth. not that your team is going to take care of it, but having this conversation with the town, who is responsible department from within the town, that how would you make sure that the snow is cleared as pedestrians would cross over? Is that something that's been initiated?
It's my understanding that the applicant, and he cannot be here tonight, so I can't promise anything on his behalf, but I think it was our understanding from previous discussions that snow removal along the pedestrian ways in front of the development would be their responsibility, and they were going to take ownership of that. But once you cross the street, it's not ours anymore. So it's either those property owners or the town that are responsible for, the snow clearing and the sidewalk. I think it's, and I'm not positive about Grafton's policy, if it's, the property owner has to clear the walk in front of their property. I know that's common in many municipalities. So, that's something we can talk about with the engineering department, DPW, to confirm that. But at least along Pine Street, we were planning on removing that and managing that snow.
So maybe I'll take it back to Bob and Chris. I just wanted to force this conversation. I don't know if we don't have this as a line item, we follow through. We might end up in a situation where there is not a lot of clarity who is going to clear up the snow removal process. And then you can have the most flashing lights out there, but if you cannot cross the roads, if you cannot walk on the sidewalks, it's not worth all these discussions. That's my 2 cents.
Well, I'm curious if the board considers a potential condition of approval that requires something along those lines. If that's something you would normally do or not.
We normally have lots of conditions.
Okay.
Whether we've had
Fair
that
enough.
condition or not, I don't know. The town's never plowed any sidewalks around where I live. I've got a 14-foot country road that's mostly unpaved now. It used to be paved, but in a few years they might get around to it. So we don't know much about how well they plow stuff.
I'm pretty sure the town does plow some sidewalks, but
Oh yeah, no, like around the center, I know they do.
not on our road, Bob, because we don't have a sidewalk on our road.
Well, if we had a road,
It'd be nice if we had a road.
I think the planning board could do something about that, wouldn't you?
What I'll do is I can reach out to DPW and get a little clear input on that and what the potential impact on their operations would be. They may not be really too willing to do the clearing there, as I know that their operations can be quite strained, but in terms of capacity, but I'll reach out to them and see if there's a solution that can be had there. I think typically it is the private owner's responsibility to clear it, but there are some, such as the bridge, it might be some public input that's needed. So
I think if nothing else, to address Prabhu's question, is really just a matter of getting some clarity on who would normally be expected to be responsible for what aspects of snow removal in this area. And if there is a need for the board to go outside the normal procedures to ensure adequate, basically the concern is that adequate pedestrian safety during and after snow events. And chances are the typical procedures will work, but if nothing else, I think we would just like to be clear that we understand what would normally be done, and that would inform us as to whether we need to put some extra conditions into the permit. Right now, we don't know those answers.
I'm not even sure who the property owners are. Part of it would be the state through the MBTA for some portion, and above that, maybe some from whoever owns that particular property in Centec Park, backing up to the road. I am interested in whether there was reference in your review, Robert, to the need to have a sidewalk to the station. To the station. Is what's being proposed does it do everything that you think should be done?
Yes. In my review of the submitted site plans, I did see the location of one of the crossings that was referenced at the southerly driveway. I did not see anything annotated or shown for the northerly driveway, not at least in the materials that I reviewed. So, we would be looking for the detail, the design detail for the northerly crossing, where it's located and where the our RFB equipment would be placed and located. That particular driveway to the north has very good visibility from a sightline perspective. I don't have any reason to believe that the crossing couldn't be designed to a high level to be very visible, and that there are sidewalk connections that would allow residents from that, particularly from that northerly driveway, to cross the street to the existing sidewalk system and work their way toward the MBTA station. So adequate provision is made for pedestrian accessibility on that basis, subject to us seeing the details of that design. The southerly driveway crossing is shown on the plan set. It's shown on the south side of the driveway, the location closer to the MBTA driveway. I simply raise concern that the visibility to that particular location be very carefully considered. It may be the case that the speeds in that particular vicinity are perhaps even lower than where the applicant actually measured the speeds, which is a little further north of that. But that location is far more sensitive to visibility or sightline issues for a number of reasons, one of which is it's on the curved portion of Pine Street as you're coming over the overpass around that curve. There's vegetation on that roadside edge. There's a no clear zone, if you will, that would preclude the ability to remove, trim, or replace existing vegetation. And we just want to make sure that the sight lines are sufficient for that particular location. But assuming they are, that is also a location that is well placed in terms of the ability to get people who may be going to the retail outlet to get to the train station and vice versa. So we think that the pedestrian accommodation features here are appropriate and that they'll serve the project well.
What do we have now? I don't remember. What do we have now and what's in the plan in terms of sidewalk on the west side, on the station side? Once you get across the crosswalks, is there a sidewalk that connects from?
Yes,
Centennial
there is a
Drive?
sidewalk.
Hmm?
Yes, there is a sidewalk. I don't believe Mr. Michaud had received revised drawings that we submitted back on May 5th or so, which showed that northerly crosswalk. But there is a proposed sidewalk along, the east side of Pine Street along the whole development. And then on the west side, there is a sidewalk that leads from at least Centennial down to the MBTA station.
Goes all
That's
the way
correct.
up around the corner.
Okay.
So again, I haven't seen the detailed plan. So both crosswalks connect with
Yes.
existing sidewalks
Yes.
on the west side.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Chris has questions. Chris, Justin.
Robert can go ahead.
I just wanted to clarify, Justin. Ms. Christie, you said sidewalk on both, or it's only on one side? It's only on the west side. There is no sidewalk on the east side.
There is no sidewalk currently on the east side, correct?
Right. Okay.
Correct.
I just checked the map. And I couldn't see anything on the
No,
east
correct.
side. Sorry, Justin. Go ahead.
The plan will have a sidewalk on the east side between the driveways. So that's,
There is a lot of proposed sidewalks.
yes.
And someone is going to clear up all the snow from there.
Right.
I guess I want to see the plan about the sidewalks, where they'll be, and just to be clear.
Yeah, I think, the drawings that you folks have do have that, it may be best for me to kind of annotate one of those layout drawings to just give you a quick reference. So I can have that this week.
Okay.
So my question is for Chris Guarantini. I apologize, I made your last name sound wrong, but the RRFB, you said those are activated manually by the pedestrians?
Correct.
Do they have any indication on go ahead and cross for the pedestrians themselves once they press that button?
So I mean, there's a little sign that goes with the push button that kind of tells the pedestrian what's happening. I mean, state laws, dictate that
yes,
drivers stop for pedestrians in the crosswalk. So the signs are not traffic signals. They're not red lights. They are, purely intended to improve safety at pedestrian crossings by, significantly enhancing driver awareness that a pedestrian is there and actively trying to cross the street. So typically you'll have a sign on both sides of the street and each sign faces both directions. So when you push the button on one side, it flashes in both directions on both sides of the street so that cars approaching it have, notification from both sides of the road that there are pedestrians actively crossing. I mean, that's generally how these are designed and utilized, everywhere. So that's the kind of approved, the MUTCD approved system. So
Yeah, I can speak to some experience with that type of sign. Not too many years ago when I would walk my grandchildren to school, they live about 2 blocks from the school and they have to cross a fairly busy street to get there. And they have that type of sign located there and it works pretty well. As always, when it's not controlling the vehicular traffic, when you press the button and the sign starts flashing, you as a pedestrian want to watch to make sure the vehicles are actually stopping, because once in a while, even though the lights are flashing, the vehicles will blow right through it. But it's generally, in my observation, it's generally been, in that particular context at least, it was fairly effective. Most of the time, the drivers do stop so that the kids can cross the street safely.
Okay. Yeah, my follow-up was going to be along the lines of if there's any type of equipment that is approved and works, so to speak, that doesn't require a pedestrian to press the button. Because my experiences with crosswalks that we need to have a button pressed is in big cities, and a lot of times I see people just step right out and go rather without worrying about a button. And if there's sightline concerns, that's a slight concern of mine, but hearing Mr. Robbins' explanation of actually using these, I'm far more comfortable now.
Yeah. And in contrast to this type of arrangement, quite often at intersections in cities where they have full stop control, traffic signals, including a walk signal, it's often true or rumored to be true. And I think this is it is. Accounts I've read have suggested that in some cases it is true that the pedestrian button doesn't actually have any effect at all, other than to make the pedestrians feel like they're doing something. But that's a very different situation from what we're discussing here.
Right. I'll just add that while there are technologies available for detecting the presence of a pedestrian in and around the crossing, and those have been used in several examples I can think of. That technology is not foolproof, A, and B, you run the risk of over actuating the crossing. So if a pedestrian simply walking along the sidewalk in the vicinity of the crossing but not crossing, there's a potential that strobe would be activated. And the effectiveness of these particular controls is that when they do strobe, it's something that doesn't happen all the time. So it's much more visible and apparent to an approaching motorist that something's going on. It gets their attention more. To the extent these get activated regularly, it almost becomes background noise, so to speak, and they become less effective over time. So the push button controls as the means of activating them are preferred practice in my opinion, and are less apt to malfunction or unduly activate the system.
Thank you.
Justin?
I tried to say thank you, but I think I got cut up.
Yeah, it seems to me that out there, everybody still has to have the basic skill set for crossing a road without a traffic light and a walk light. This just helps them, gives them a little more muscle, but they still have to practice the normal skill set of looking both ways and all those things. I am interested in who will own this equipment, who will power it, and who will maintain it.
We would expect to install solar powered. Those will have good exposure at that location for both of the driveways. So we don't view this as being something that would be hardwired. And the ownership, I guess, is up for DPW's discretion, I guess.
Well, I want ownership and the cost of maintaining those puppies. We've had some of those speed signs down by one of our schools, and it's been not working now for off and on, maybe on for months and months, because they've ordered, the DPW's ordered parts and that sort of thing. And just as soon that we minimize the burden on the town. So we ought to get understanding with the DPW or whomever is in charge of that about that.
Yeah, I can add that. I'll be speaking to DPW about the snow, so I can add that to the things to follow up with them about. I'll also just note, if the board is interested in a live example of the rapid beacons, there is one outside of Medelka's in Worcester. That's just one that comes to mind. So if you go on a weekend and get yourself an ice cream and see one in action. So
Yeah, consider that that's an incredibly fast, heavily traveled road.
it's certainly a larger road than what's proposed here. Yeah.
Yeah, and it actually works quite well. People stop.
Where's this?
You know where the ice cream store is, near the Marine Corps, whatever that Brotherhood thing on Lake Ave?
More or less. Yeah, okay. There are a few things that may be the same or maybe a different version on West Main Street in Westboro. We go by, and there's some other places. I don't know. There's a unit up as you go up Worcester Street to the Common, but I'm not sure that uses a button. That may just be blinking sign.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Other things to discuss.
I'll just note as an observation, because I don't think it impacts on our process in any way whatsoever. But they did receive the results of their MEPA review. And fortunately, an environmental impact report is not a requirement for this project. Reading through the MEPA review is kind of interesting. And they discuss many of the concerns that we have discussed. There's a fair amount of discussion of traffic, but nothing I think that impacts our review really in any way. They did make some recommendations for things like water management, particularly in terms of landscaping, dealing with climate change, greenhouse gases, talking about solar energy and efficiency and that type of thing. Those ideas may have some influence on the project design in various other areas, but I didn't see anything in there that caught my eye as something this board needs to worry about with our plan review.
Okay. Is there anything else we need to do tonight? Accept a request to continue the hearing, perhaps.
Bob, I just have one question. So I didn't read the review completely, but since it's definitely adding new trips on this road, is there a guideline on what percentage it'll impact the traffic in terms of timing? Like, will it add a minute more or something? Or is it that this road is so less traveled that that cannot be really determined? Because when we did this for another facility, I think there was some guidelines that it'll impact the traffic by a certain percentage. I'm just curious. I know there are some numbers about the new trips which are proportional to the expectation, but does it increase the time by
Yeah, so our study, goes through an analysis of future no build and future build scenarios. And then we also identify that the operations in the future at Route 20 was one of the locations where we showed that it's one of those things where you look out in the future 7 years and you say, okay, if these traffic volumes all materialize in the way that we forecast them today, then you can optimize that intersection and make meaningful improvements. So that's one of the things we showed in our study, was that that's an opportunity in the future, that you could optimize the signal timings at that location, but it's not something that you would do today to reflect something that would happen 7 years from now. It's just something that, in the normal course of maintaining traffic signals, towns and the state agencies should be looking at how locations are functioning to make sure that you're providing efficient operations. And then, from a capacity analysis perspective, what we've shown is that we don't change the capacity from no build to build. So that was, we look at what's the relative impact of the development on the transportation network, and we look for changes in, operations. And so that's kind of the methodology that we follow. It's all based on highway capacity methodologies and software that we use to run those capacity analyses. And they show that, the development, isn't going to have a significant impact beyond, existing conditions. So, if you've got something that's not functioning well today, the development doesn't make it better, but we aren't changing the levels of service.
Yeah, I think Vikram, you may be interested in reading through some of the detail in that report, because it does get into calculating queuing delays and levels of service at the intersections, and it's like in terms of specific numbers and changes in performance of an intersection, and that's I can't speak with a whole lot of expertise, but I know I'm pretty sure you'll find that in there, things like the predicted queuing delays, and that's probably one of the key factors in determining the level of service, is how long people have to wait before making a turn or passing through the intersection. It's in the report.
Okay.
It's an awful lot of detail to wade through, but if you're interested in that level of detail, it's there, I believe.
Right. I'm just assuming that if this exact thing was, say, on Route 20, I'm sure there'll be some impact. There will be more impact, I would assume. I'm sure this has some impact, but based on the current condition, and as Chris said, looking 7 years down or a few years down, it's tough to say here, but say Route 9 or Route 20, which are already busy, having a similar development will impact it more than it does here.
I mean, again, you're looking at traffic generation, and then you distribute the traffic through the roadway network. So traffic leaves the site, it gets split based on a series of kind of percentage destinations. So some traffic goes north, some traffic goes south, and then from there, traffic goes east or west, at 20 and 30. And then looking at, like I said, we do have in our analysis that even though in the morning, we're showing an impact that could occur up at Route 20 that if you retime the signal, you could mitigate, that operating condition. So it's just a matter of, monitoring conditions in the future and then optimizing signal operations to achieve whatever kind of the local and regional goal is. So on Route 20, it may be kind of a policy decision to maintain throughput on Route 20 because that's carrying more traffic, and you're interested in moving regional traffic on the main artery. And in that situation, you may be willing to live with, some poorer operations on a side street to serve the higher volume of traffic. So that's, it gets into, the policy of the community, the policy of the state, what's the objectives of the corridor, vehicular progression, it gets into a lot of, choices that, communities have to make about how they want intersections to function and what's important at that location during different times throughout the day.
It can get interesting, particularly when you look at, the projects that impact Route 20, some of these other future projects and things like this. What is so far a hypothetical UPS project. There's the Edgemere project down, farther west on Route 20. I think there are some other projects, either current or planned or anticipated, that you get some of those projects together, which are likely to have a more substantial impact on Route 20 than this. And you'll get to a point probably where you're going to have to take a serious look at the signal time. And I think I remember reading in the MEPA report that that's one of the points that they raised, that this project in and of itself is not likely to justify signal timing changes, but some of the other projects may very well bring that about.
Who decides and controls the adjusting of the signal timing? In this case, is it the state? Is it Shrewsbury?
For state roads, it would be the state, and for local roads, it would be I believe the DPW.
Yeah, well, this is
On Route 20, it's likely to be.
20 is a state road. Unlike 140 and 30 in North Grafton, although 140 and 122 in North Grafton is, I think, the state's. So it's in a system of three lights. Okay, what else? Anything else?
Do we have any public input at this point?
No one has been waving that I know
I haven't seen any indication of that.
I haven't seen a whole lot of public. Well, no, we got three people over there. Apparently not. Let us know if you have any comment. Send written comment through the website, to the town website. There's a mechanism for sending comments on this project that'll come to us.
And we do expect to be continuing this hearing.
Yes, if the applicants are so inclined to request.
Yep, on behalf of the applicant, I'll request that we continue to, I believe, June 14th.
Their very next meeting.
And I will get the paperwork to you, Chris.
I will move that the board grant the applicants to be received written request to continue this hearing to Monday, June 14th at 7:30 p.m.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there discussion? Hearing none. Dave,
Aye.
Justin,
Aye.
Linda,
Aye.
Prabhu,
Aye.
and I vote aye. Motion carried. We'll see you next time.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll look forward to seeing this get done.
Yeah, I think we'd all like to see it on the tax rolls.
And of course, getting it built will be the whole another thing, particularly with the amazing increase in cost of building materials.
Well, they're not going to use wood.
An ongoing discussion.
We can hope that maybe that's a temporary situation, but
We're trying to get creative.
That's not our worry. Well, ultimately, the town hopes to see this built, but conditions outside of our control will influence that.
Hopefully,
Value engineering is a part of every project.
Sure is. Have a good night, folks.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
okay. Moving on. Back to 3, Mill Development Overlay District Literature Review and General Discussion. Is there anything new for tonight?
So I did meet with CMRPC and the CMRPC, the team that was currently working with us on that, they will be transferring out to a new opportunity. And so I met with the new project team that'll be taking over this project. And so we kind of all together met and kind of transferred the project and the details, got acquainted with each other. So I expect to have some more updates from them in short time, and then we'll have more consistent update and presentation to the board. But I did kind of have that update. So.
Anything else for this item? Moving on, discussion item, subdivision rules and regulations update.
Yes, well, at our last discussion, we talked some about the fire department's requirements. And I think my review of those requirements suggested that one of the items one of their requirements that may impact the subdivision rules is their desire for a minimum 24-foot roadway width. As previously noted, our minor street C has a 22-foot minimum width. Minor B is 26, and it goes up from there. So if we were to respond to that particular fire department requirement, we would be changing the minor street C minimum width, pavement width, from 22 to 24 feet. And some of the discussion we had last time was around what might be some of the unintended consequences of that, if any. Part of the question, at least, was a question, according to my notes, there was a concern about what happens on a road when you've got cars parked on both sides and an emergency vehicle needs to make its way through. There, actually, the 24-foot width makes an improvement, because sort of the average, the generally accepted width of a passenger vehicle is 7 feet, and a fire apparatus at 22 feet, vehicles parked on both sides leaves 8 feet down the center of the road, which is really, really tight for a fire apparatus. And in fact, probably the mirrors on each side of the fire apparatus would extend past that. So a 24-foot roadway width gives the fire apparatus 10 feet if cars are parked on both sides. That's not going to happen often, but it can happen. So from that angle, 24 feet is a definite improvement. There's also a sort of a countervailing consideration of trying to minimize the amount of pavement so as to minimize runoff, and there adding 2 feet of pavement width sort of goes in the opposite direction of that. But in terms of public safety, probably a 24-foot width is better. It appears that the zoning bylaw for flex gives the board the option of reducing the roadway width, although it's the exact wording of the flex provision is a little bit unclear. It explicitly mentions reduced right-of-way widths. It does not explicitly mention pavement width. It mentions cartway width, which may or may not be the same thing, because it's a reference to some previous incarnation of the subdivision rules that no longer exists and no longer uses that particular term. But flex still gives us the flexibility to reduce roadway and right-of-way widths. But by default, if we choose 24 instead of 22, that meets the fire department's requirements. And it's also, as I may have mentioned last time around, it's consistent with the minimum roadway width in a lot of towns. So it seems like it's probably a fairly inconsequential change. I haven't been able to think of any really adverse consequences, but there may still be some. As sort of a side note in terms of actually dealing with the text of the subdivision rules, we have the appendices, schedules A and B, that give roadway profiles. And while the text of the bylaws describes things like the 22 foot for minor C, 26 for B, and so on, describes them as the minimum widths, the diagrams describe them as the exact width. And so something I'm not quite sure about is whether the diagrams are to be taken as prescriptive or descriptive, in the sense that if we say the minimum width is 24, it could be larger, but the diagram says it's just written in terms of 24. It's kind of a detail that's probably at some point I want to make sure we're clear on, but the basic idea is whether we would be comfortable increasing the minimum width of a minor C from 22 up to 24 feet.
I would be. You're saying 7 feet for a car, but we're reminded recently on social media for some of us that landscapers, trucks and trailers are big. I'll bet you they're bigger than that.
Yeah,
they're roughly as wide as Giorgio Road.
It's always possible for a vehicle to block a roadway in an unacceptable manner.
Yeah.
And that will be true no matter how wide we make the road.
No, but the thing is that those landscapers are becoming more and more prevalent. At least I get to drive around during the day when they're out working. So
at least so it seems.
No. Is anyone not happy with the idea of pushing it up to 24 feet for minor road C? Okay, I guess we can.
So I will. I'll proceed with that. That's a fairly easy one. We also discussed.
We ought. You mentioned the cross sections.
Yes.
I think we ought to look at those. For all I know, those are still handed down copies from when the bylaw and the rules were written and printed on mimeograph machines.
Yeah, they are definitely hand drawn. They are definitely hand drawn.
Okay, we might want to revisit that because we ought to think about it generally. We run into trouble putting street trees in the tree lawns, which we may or may not even have, and when we don't have a sidewalk, and we ought to look at that, although I don't know whether it has to slow us down on the rest of this. Chris?
I would just mention, I think that's a good idea to look at updating the cross sections. I'll note there's actually free software. I wouldn't use it. It's kind of playful, but it's called Street Mix. And you may want to take a look at that website, streetmix. I believe it's .org. I can send a link around to the board, but you're able to specify the length and you can kind of create cross sections. I would also note, just to Mr. Robbins' comment of which is prescriptive, I've seen a lot of communities include language that that the actual wording is prescriptive and that the diagrams are for illustrative purposes only. We should look to see if we have that language. I would recommend including it.
Yes, that's how I would. That's what I would assume. It would be good to make that explicit. In that context, however, I would note that the diagrams have some pretty specific dimensional requirements, such as fire hydrants to be 2 feet off the curb, such as the placement and depth of utilities. Some of that probably ought to be prescriptive, while some of that may be illustrative. And so that that may suggest that we take a closer look at that and make sure that the rules and regs are absolutely clear on what's required versus what's suggested or just for illustrative purposes only. I won't try to go through all that right now, but I think it's a good thing to keep in mind that that we want to make sure that that there's no conflict and that we're actually spelling out everything that needs to be spelled out. So with that said, I believe last time I mentioned that the fire department had a requirement regarding a change of grade in no more than 5% in 75 feet. And I had taken, done some calculations and tried to look at that in terms of what the regs specify in vertical curves. And the fire department's requirement works out to be a minimum K value of 15, whereas the rules and regs have a minimum K value of 28, and it goes up from there depending on circumstances. So I think we meet that easily enough. Then the other question, the other fire department issue had to do with turning radius of the trucks. And there, that comes into play. The corner requirements, corner radii at intersections are more than adequate to accommodate fire apparatus. So there's no issue there. It does come into play when we look at turnarounds at the end of a cul-de-sac. And there is sort of three important points. One is the outer diameter of the pavement. We specify a minimum outer diameter of the turnaround overall, but the outer diameter or radius of the paved area of the turnaround has to be enough to accommodate the outer turning radius of the fire apparatus. And I believe the figure they gave us was 38 feet and change. So we could specify a minimum outer radius of 40 feet on that. There's an addition, in addition, there beyond the edge of the pavement, there has to be an area kept clear because part of the fire apparatus extends beyond the end of the front wheels. So there, if we specified a minimum 42-foot radius to be kept clear of all obstructions, we would meet there. It's what they refer to as the wall-to-wall radius. And finally, where it gets tricky is if the turnaround has an island, then the radius of the island has to be such that the truck can turn around on the pavement. So that gets to the inside turning radius. But the required radius of an island depends very much on the overall radius of the turnaround. So a turnaround of the much larger radius can accommodate a much larger island. So I haven't quite worked out the exact language, but we do allow islands. I know of at least one turnaround that has an island, not all that far from where I live. But I think I can work Putnam.
Yeah, except that was not given willingly. And I oppose it there, and I oppose it here. And I think that our rule sets a maximum diameter of whatever. Maybe it's the right of way.
Yeah, our rule is the turnaround has a minimum diameter of 100 feet. We have more than one turnaround with diameters larger than 100 feet.
Yeah, again, though, for various reasons, at different times, if you make big turnarounds, particularly flex, then you get even more lots, frontage for more lots at the reduced width on the circle. The frontage requirement is lower than on a straight section, so that's an interaction.
Yes, and with regard to islands, the one argument in favor of an island is that it reduces impervious area. It reduces the amount of paving required, it reduces impervious area. So from the perspective of something like low impact development, islands are a good thing. And we can prohibit islands, we can allow islands. if we allow islands, we need to say something about the maximum radius of the island. It has to be such that the fire apparatus can be accommodated.
I didn't. I guess I'm not sure. I think it's been implicit that absent something like the Merriam Road case, that we haven't agreed to islands. But if you're going to allow an island, then you have to have all of that turning radius inside as well as outside and all of that. And then you got to figure out who owns the land on the island and how it gets taken care of. Does that belong to the town? Is it the town's problem?
Now, one way to approach that particular question, of the question of whether an island should be allowed, is to think of that, excuse me, to think of that in terms of something else, which I would plan to get to. So, and very briefly, I'm thinking in terms of not for this iteration of the subdivision rules revision, but for some future consideration of some larger questions about overall street design and subdivision design, which we may approach as part of several things that are coming up on our radar. I'll briefly mention it here, and I want to get back to it just a little bit more in this discussion. One is complete streets. This complete streets may have something to say about street design, something more than I would care to tackle right now in terms of subdivision rules. We also have a study that is due to be performed under the MS4 permit, a study regarding, street design and parking lot guidelines. You know, the MS4 permit, we had committed to do that by the middle of next year. So street design is something else. Street design for stormwater management is something else that may influence what our subdivision rules want to say about street design. It may include things like low impact development, which likes to see, instead of storm drains, it likes to see swales, which may affect our rules regarding curbs. We maybe don't want curbs in some situations to facilitate low impact storm drainage. That's another topic that we are going to be, we are supposedly going to be considering that over the next year. That, to my knowledge, that study hasn't been initiated yet, but it is part of the plan. And then finally, we have a master plan update, which may include consideration of changes in how we think of subdivision design and layout. So those studies may well lead us to some conclusions regarding islands and turnarounds. So if we want to defer any further consideration of islands to those topics, I think that would be just fine.
I do too.
And so for the time being, for turnarounds, we already specify a minimum diameter, or equivalently a minimum radius for the right-of-way. We should be specifying the minimum radius of the outer edge of the pavement and the area to be kept clear. Those are simple enough to specify in terms that meet the fire department's requirements. So unless there's an objection, I will propose to include that in the subdivision rules updates.
When does a turnaround with an island in the middle of it become a road with an intersection where it meets the where you come into it?
Yeah.
Think about that. You know, at some that one you're talking about on Merriam Road, the question arises. It's pretty big, as I recall.
That turnaround was something like 100. I think I measured that on GIS as something like 165 feet in diameter.
Yep, I was there.
So yeah, there could be some interesting questions along those lines.
Okay.
And we don't need to try to solve that problem here. That's among a set of problems I think we can put off to this future set of studies where we take a sort of a more comprehensive look at road and subdivision design. more than a scope that's well beyond what I would like to accomplish in this subdivision rules update. So beyond that, anything else that anybody has on fire? I've got one or two other things to discuss. The other topic on subdivision rules updates that I've been putting off thinking a lot about is dead ends, beyond what I've already put in there, which are basically just clarifications. And where is my note on that? By and large, I don't think I'm interested in looking at any significant changes there. I think it's still true and always should be true that we want to minimize dead ends. We want to avoid dead ends as much as possible. We can talk about the maximum length, which we currently specify as 500 feet. And as I've noted a while back, that's not out of line with a lot of other communities. We could leave it at 500 feet. A lot of communities go with 600 feet. We could think about changing to 600 feet if we wanted to, but 500 feet is not bad. One thing that we might want to consider is whether in a flexible development, we would be interested in a longer maximum length for a dead end, in as much as the flexible development might be a better use of land if they didn't have to connect all the roads the way through. I'm unsure about how important it is to consider that right now. I will note that Westboro allows a 1,000-foot dead end in a flex, or their equivalent of flex, where their normal allowance is 600. So there's some precedent for that. But again, I don't know that we need to go there right now. That's another thing we might want to consider in the longer term, because also in the longer term, we may want to sort of revisit the concept of flex and adopt a more modern approach to it, as many other towns have done. Among many other things we need to think about are the fact that our approach via the major residential special permit would actually be thrown out if it was ever challenged in court. There's a Wall Street Development versus Westwood decision, which an appeals court made it quite clear that was in conflict with state law, at least in their opinion. And other towns have revised their equivalent of flex to recognize that. That's not something we need to do now, but again, in this longer term context of revisiting things, it would probably be good for us to at least review what the current state of the art is for what's now generally called open space residential development. It's the equivalent, the modern equivalent of our flex, which goes back a good number of years. It doesn't necessarily mean we change a lot of the detail, but it does mean that maybe we change our overall regulatory approach to it. We may want to think in terms of designating certain areas of town as requiring open space development, not simply making it optional. But that's not something that we can grapple with right now. So that's among several topics that I think are for future consideration. So bottom line is, and the other point I'll mention about dead ends without wanting to get into any detailed discussion is the idea that I'm generally more comfortable with dead ends that have more of a loop road configuration, like a lollipop configuration, as that's more convenient for the driver than a turnaround at the end of a road. But with a 500-foot limit on length, a loop configuration is not likely to ever work well. So that, if we were looking at longer dead ends, and maybe even just on a case-by-case basis, I think it's preferable to see them looping around rather than just going off and sticking a turnaround at the end. But for right now, that's not a topic I want to deal with. I just mention it just because that came up in my thinking about it. So I guess my bottom line is on dead ends, unless someone would like to change the length, I'm not proposing that I'm not going to propose we do anything more.
Yeah, I don't want to change the length, but I'll note that a number of the flexibilities or extensions that you were talking about, we have actually done through waivers. In other words, if there was a strong enough case, we granted a waiver for somewhat longer roads and factors like that. So it's not like it's something that we have to do anytime real soon. The bylaw we have now has history, of course. I'm probably the only one who remembers it. But it was more or less modern. Peter Lower was introducing it when he was planner and brought it in, and I went to town meeting twice before we finally got what we ended up with. There was some compromises. The other thought, though, also about the special permit is that because our system requires you to submit both kinds of subdivision, both conventional and flex. Conventional, we have subject to special permit, and I don't know the case you're talking about, but it may that may be part of an argument as to whether it's allowable or not.
Yeah, what Westwood had at the time of that court decision looked very much like ours. And the court basically threw that out. Westwood, in response, changed their scheme completely.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, let's cover that ground another time.
That I don't want to get too deeply into that right now. That's just something to keep at the back of our mind for future consideration.
Chris.
Just in terms of the dead end length and any adjustments, I think that 500 foot is consistent with the board may want to consider, which seems to have been somewhat of a pitfall in the past, is actually clearly indicating how the 500 feet should be calculated in a little bit more detail. That seems to be part of the confusion from at least the developer or staff end of things, of how that specifically is calculated in the past versus.
I've already written that into the revised rules.
Thank you.
Okay,
Yeah,
well,
I've already read that. I like the new wording.
yeah, I didn't notice it. It gets too hard to read these days, but we'll see. It seems to me that I thought we measured to the center of the turnaround.
Right, it's to the center of the turnaround, but if you don't have a turnaround, it's to the, actually, even if you have a turnaround, you think of the Brigati Village configuration. That was basically a lollipop with a turnaround sticking off to one side. So you would measure you would measure to the center of the turnaround, or to the furthest point away from the entrance on the loop road, whichever is longer. So yeah. if you just had a loop road, you'd be measuring, if the loop road were a circle, you'd measure the stem and then you'd measure halfway around the circle.
Yeah, let's beat this stuff up another night.
Yeah, but like I said, I've already written that in. You can review that. With the exception of the details regarding the, what we talked about tonight to meet buyer's requirements, and any review of the cross sections, I've kind of reached the end of my list of things that I would like to include in this revision of the subdivision rules. So I will prepare a revised document for our next meeting. I may or may not have further questions for the board regarding these details of cross sections that we talked about tonight, because I haven't looked at those prior to tonight. We may be getting very close to the point where we have a complete revision that we are ready to consider complete and subject to the process of getting it adopted. So if anybody else has any suggestions for things that we need to revise in subdivision rules, let me know ASAP, because I'm now very much interested in bringing this to the finish line.
Okay, yes. We probably all are. I see there was some confusion about 20 Milford Road tonight.
Yeah, we don't have a public hearing scheduled for that property for tonight. I am aware of ongoing situations with that are being handled at a staff level, also with the building inspector. So I can circle back with him and see where they are in terms of addressing those.
Okay.
But I apologize if there was any confusion of there being a hearing tonight.
Okay. Bills. We had a bill.
I'll move that we approve the bills and direct the planner to sign on behalf of the board.
Second.
Moved and second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. Dave,
Aye.
Justin,
Aye.
Linda,
Aye.
Bravo.
Aye.
I vote aye. Motion carries. Minutes of April 26th.
Didn't see anything.
There was one.
Hmm?
No.
I'll move the minutes of April 26th be approved as drafted, subject to any revisions made during discussion.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. Discussion. Hearing none. Dave,
Aye.
Justin,
Aye.
Linda,
Aye.
Bravo.
Aye.
I vote aye. Motion carries. Staff report.
So just two things tonight. I'll keep it quick. We held our local rapid recovery plan workshop last week. So that's part of the ongoing effort looking at New England Village neighborhood up in by the Perry Hill Park location. It's a project that's a little bit evolved over as we got more guidance from the state. But the workshop was we're individually interviewing business owners and stakeholders in the area. And the workshop is meant to expand that. Unfortunately, at that meeting, we had a very low turnout, despite my best efforts to advertise. So we ended up turning that more into an additional interview session with the two members of the public who attended, discussing with the consultant the best options moving forward. They were asking if they could, if the board would be willing, the planning board would be willing to host them for a workshop. It would consist of about 30 minutes with a small presentation at the beginning, background on the project, and then really opening up to Q&A and they have a couple survey questions as well, kind of guided discussion items. If the board's willing to host that, I would probably also look to invite as a joint meeting some of the other what I would consider stakeholder boards, such as the Board of Selectmen. But I just wanted to run that by the planning board to see if they had an appetite for that, to host it on their June 14th meeting. We could then kind of move forward with shaping that a little bit more. But I wanted to get everyone else's thoughts before I committed anything to that.
Would we want to add a meeting that's a workshop meeting to do that?
That's another option, is that we could do a separate special meeting if we'd like to pick a different date. But I'll defer to the board if that's more preferable.
Well, I guess deciding which way to go depends on what we've got coming, which you know a lot more about than we do.
Yeah, I think in terms of projects from this meeting to the next, we have the 8 Pine and the 109 Creeper Hill. I think given the approximate 30 minutes to 45 minutes that I think that this workshop would take, I think we're still kind of within that 7 to 7:30 range that it may push some of our regular business towards the end, but I think that may still be doable.
Yeah.
And we do have an additional new hearing on the 14th. and Talia
Sorry,
just
thank you.
mentioned.
Yeah. There is, if you're trying to draw from other bodies, selectmen or whomever, then it takes more time. And it might be that you just, if you do some checking, you might find that some night other than our Monday nights would work better.
Okay.
As in terms of getting participation. Okay, anything else on staff report?
So the other thing to report on, I know we've been getting many questions about the governor's orders lifting and how that affects in-person meetings versus virtual. My understanding is currently that's left as public option. Essentially, the state has said it's up to the communities how they want to proceed for a matter of time. We are awaiting additional guidance from the state, which is anticipated prior to June 15th. Staff is aware of it. There have already been discussions with the town administrator and how that may affect and how that'll play out. But I think we're really kind of waiting for that additional guidance before we really make a solid plan that's, for public distribution. But those discussions are happening. We'll certainly be looking to board members on what their levels of comfort with that are. There may be options for hybrid models. I know that the conference room has seen significant improvements in digitization in terms of being able to call in and actually participate in the meeting that way rather than via Zoom. One of the kind of discussion items is obviously the public has gotten really used to Zoom. So how do we incorporate that as well as an option, or do we? So a lot in the air, more to come. We have June 14th is still before that. So I'm hoping to have a much clearer picture for that meeting of our plan moving forward. But I'll continue to be in communication with you guys as that moves forward. So.
Okay. Any other staff report? No more staff report? Anything in correspondence? I didn't see anything.
I have one thing that I guess qualifies as correspondence from someone outside that talked to me directly regarding our sign bylaw. It was, I guess, an EDC was talking about it back in 2019, I think it was, about having some changes to our sign bylaw that they had a workshop with businesses. I got a email with their minutes. I haven't reviewed that yet, and I plan to look at the video at least to possibly bring that back up. I just didn't know if Bob or Dave or Linda had any memory of us actually doing anything with, as far as making any final changes to our sign bylaws in any way since then.
Not recently.
No, we haven't done much with changing the sign bylaw for quite a while. We've talked about it a good bit.
Yep.
And I keep saying that every time we talk about it, everybody has a different thing they want. So we really hadn't identified a doable approach to anything. What problem, first figure out what problems we're actually trying to solve and what the options of blah, 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 but we're not on it at this point. We have talked about it. It's pretty much gone dormant.
We have spent quite a bit of
that meeting
over the years. What's interesting to me is that I have twice heard that EDC has, and this is just within the last couple of years, that EDC has significant issues with the sign bylaw. but those have never been communicated to the board. So we currently have no knowledge of what their concerns are. And as Bob noted, there are as many different desires for the sign bylaw as there are people with opinions on it. And it's been difficult in the past to try to reconcile that. And it's been, it's been, every time we have wrestled with it, it's been a struggle. We did kind of a major update of that, must be 6 or 7 years ago now. But we just kind of cleaned up a lot of ambiguities and made a few substantive changes. But since then, we had some discussions. Probably a good 5 or 6 years ago, we had some discussions, meetings with members of the business community at which we heard some concerns. But recently, for whatever talk the EDC or whoever has been making about sign bylaw problems, none of that has ever come to our attention. If it were to be brought to our attention, maybe we could do something with it.
Yep. So I basically told the person that I would look into this a little bit more and get back to them and bring it back here once I see a little bit more about what's going on with what they're talking about.
Yeah.
But I wanted to just mention that
You've gotten something interesting going on with your sound.
Yeah, we did really, I'm sorry, Chris.
Go ahead.
We did actually have really tried to reach out to the business community and to the community, even since I've been on the board. And it's like pulling teeth. It really, getting to what are the problems? The businesses don't necessarily want what the town wants. And, balancing those out. And we've never really had a clear kind of picture of what it is that everybody thinks they want. And it's hard to sort of say, well, let's change the sign bylaw when, what do you really want? So go ahead.
Everybody wants to be able to put out their sign. That's basically the bottom line. And everybody has different problems. Some have to put their A-frame signs that they're not supposed to have on the public sidewalk rather than on their property. And somebody else, the sign is too small to see coming down Worcester Street. And somebody, I am curious about whether everything they did was a noticed public meeting and we didn't know anything about them doing any of that, let alone being invited to be part of it.
Okay. So
Yes, Chris.
So I think most likely the background I have on that is me and John Allen are consistently talking about, who staffs the EDC, are consistently talking about challenges that businesses have, and especially in terms of zoning, how can we look at solutions for that? Part of our recent discussions, we're working on setting up a schedule of potential zoning changes that we would obviously present to the planning board and any other relevant boards, but trying to do part of my idea is looking at scheduling 2 to 3 major zoning changes per town meeting. The idea being that you don't want to put people to sleep with zoning changes, but to be able to address some of the regulatory issues or challenges that we see. And that by doing it that way, it gives you potential to kind of do a rolling thing where you do public engagement workshops, which during COVID we haven't been able to do anything like that. But you can do public engagement workshops and do the pre-planning so that by town meeting you have a really solid proposal that the community has had a hand in creating. So it's on our radar. I think the signage bylaws and parking are always, every community struggles with those. So
Yeah, we had a project where, we're thinking about looking at ways to get the parking in the, basically in the historic district, and, generally in that area, because the parking picture there is just different. And we talked about it, we thought about it, we went on to something that had to be done that night. If you're thinking of this fall town meeting, it's about time to start running. No, okay.
Yeah, no, yeah, the low hanging fruit that we'll likely be pursuing for, I believe it was
October
fall
something.
town meeting was looking at the outdoor seating. And adjusting some of that, but in anticipation of the following year. So, but that's the one that we're mainly looking at. So,
Wonder if we need to make any rules about movie companies coming to town and parking everywhere. Apparently they're good at being good neighbors, because they do it, every day, every week somewhere. I hate to think how much of an effort moving those hundreds of people around is.
The same company, I believe it was the same company, did filming on my street in Worcester. It was quite the to see the whole operation over the course of a weekend from start to finish was quite a sight to see. They made it look like winter.
Well, they did in Grafton too, for one house. Yeah.
It's quite convincing too.
Well, yeah, shoot at night, pick the right camera angle so that you don't see where the snow isn't. But it must be awfully nice to work on a show that has the kind of budget they must have to send that. People were out here making arrangements months ago, locating things. Do they come into town hall looking for ideas about where there might be something that would help them?
I believe so. I believe a lot of times what they use for site selection, there is a website that the state maintains, advertising local kind of locations for shooting. And having seen this, that was one of my recommendations, is Grafton's sites are a little light on representation there. So we may want to update some of our beautiful areas in that list. So.
Okay. Is there anything else that may legally come before us? If not,
Move to adjourn.
Second.
moved and seconded to adjourn, not debatable. Dave,
Aye.
Justin,
Aye.
Linda,
Aye.
Prabhu,
Aye.
and I vote aye.